My company is English with Purpose, and up until recently, we've been focused on internationally trained, skilled immigrants working in the United States, and English is their target language. But during this time of uncertainty, I've been working on a pivot with hot topics that I think are affecting everybody. So what I hope to do today is just give you a brief overview. AI, artificial intelligence, is moving very quickly, and most of us have busy lives and we don't have endless time to keep up with everything that's happening. So the way we advertise this is for people who mastered ChatGPT and stopped there, because who wants another learning curve? So we're gonna briefly get into some ethical considerations too, because I will tell you, I have been to as many AI workshops and lectures as I can attend during this downtime, and there's a lot of things that people usually pick an angle. This is changing society, and it's changing society right now. And part of my training is philosophy, so I'm always thinking about the ethical implications of anything new. And it's messy, we're in it, it's rapid, some amazing things that can really help you, and other things that I think we should all be thinking about, not to be judgy, but I just want to introduce some considerations that are hot discussions so that you can think about that for yourself and make your own decisions about how and when and what type of AI you engage in your personal and work life and move forward. And then we're gonna save, so this is the first time I've done this presentation. I think it'll be 45 minutes. I'll rush through some things so that we have time at the end. Definitely, the whole point is to have collective wisdom. And what I've learned from going to all of these lectures and workshops is that for those of us who are not on the technical side, nobody's more of an expert than anyone else. And I know there's tips and tricks and wisdom in this room, and I want to make sure we save time to share that. So at the end, we're going to look at 5 or 6 alternative tools to the big 3. The big 3 being ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and Microsoft Copilot. I selected them on purpose because they're things that I use and or are emerging as front runners. But I'm sure every day there are more tools, right? It's overwhelming. We don't need 25 different image generators. Eventually this is going to shake out, right? And the top 3 best ones will rise to the top. Same with presentation slides, same with all of these specific tools. So the phrase is energy flows where attention goes, right? So I don't believe in spending time checking out all of these different things. So pick 3 things and become good at them, right? If they work for you. I used to be a 6th grade teacher, so I don't assume any knowledge. We'll rush through this if you know this already. But I feel like things are moving so fast. There's a lot of lingo. As a linguist and an English teacher, I'm always sensitive to acronyms and things like that. And I feel usually as things move forward, people get to a point where they're like, I should know that word by now. Or I should know that phrase by now. And I feel dumb asking what it actually means. So I think we all know artificial intelligence. I asked GPT for a definition that a college student would understand. And this is what it gave me. I like the way it broke down, what is it for? So learning from experience, understanding language, recognizing patterns, solving problems, and making decisions. And of course, automating processes. We're gonna get to that in a moment. Who already uses AI in their daily life? All right, which tools are you familiar with? You can just shout it out.
Cool. Only what you said.
Only what I said, the big
Perplexity.
We're gonna have some fun with Perplexity today. Claude, we're gonna have some fun with Claude today. Gemini? Okay. What are your concerns about where this technology is going?
Everything.
Job security.
Yes.
I have a number of clients that feel like this is all they need to do to post on social newsletter. Let chat do it all. And I think there's some danger in that.
Yeah, not only is there danger, if this is connected to their brand and it's AI generated, it's not protected by copyright. And so there are also legal implications, at least in the US, because we're gonna clarify that. So if you wanna protect your brand and say, that's my content, it's not your content. At least it's not legally protected if you used AI.
But they're mostly doing it to cut corners so that they can do it faster and they don't have to think on their own. And if you're not thinking about your business strategy, your social media strategy, you're not thinking squat. You're just putting shit out there and you don't know why.
Just adding to the volume of
Yeah.
crap. Exactly. And how many people in the past 2 months have had an uptick in spam solicitations? And they all sound the same?
All the newsletters
Yeah.
are currently sound the same.
And as for those of us who are consultants or business owners, does that work for you? Do you ever respond to them? No. So it's this crazy world where bots are now talking to bots. What are we doing?
We're just on the sideline.
I think cybersecurity is also a concern from a security and like how open these systems are and the vulnerabilities that they have.
We're going to get into that because there's a lot of,
That's a
everything's
big thing.
moving so fast that
Data.
everybody's not exactly being safe because we're just not informed.
Like, as somebody who works in data-driven decision-making, I'm very concerned about the biases and inaccuracies that are in there. And I think that people, it's funny, because the same people who would be like, you shouldn't source from Wikipedia or AI for all the
Mhm.
research. There's been a lot of concerning things about things that has spit out, especially depending on which tech billionaire has made the tool.
Exactly. Exactly. So then we're going to go a little bit into how it's trained. This is it's such a rich topic. So we're going to be racing a little bit. But this is what I wanted to hit on. I have a Canva Pro account. I feel bad every time I try to use it to generate an image because I know it's wasting energy. I would not recommend Canva Pro's image generator over, for example, the ChatGPT one. I put in a cat thinking about AI, and this is what came out. I would argue that cat could be thinking about anything. So,
That's why it's AI.
right.
See that leaf?
Good point.
Yeah, what's going on with the leaf there? I'm like, that's a question.
Yeah, it's cute. It's very non-specific. And then I burned up some energy with that useless task. There's no computer.
No one's typing.
Maybe he meant to have the computer and just didn't get it generated. It looks like that.
Oh,
So anyway, I've not had success. At first, when Canva introduced their image generator, I was excited because I hate stock photography and finding diverse stock photography is everyone's pain point. And I thought, oh my God, finally, we can actually generate images of the people we work with, what they really look like, the multiculturalism that is our population. But I haven't had a lot of success. Sometimes it just goes off the rails completely. ChatGPT for image generation is better right now than Canva. All right, this is from our Perplexity bot friend. How's it trained? And I asked it to give an explanation again that a college student could understand. So think of AI training like teaching a student with flashcards. You show the student a card, which is the data. You tell them the answer, which is the label, and they try to guess next time. The more cards and feedback they get, the better they become at predicting the right answer, even for new cards they've never seen before. So in short, it's trained by feeding it lots and lots of data, which is where the bias comes in, letting it make predictions, and then correcting its mistakes until it can perform the task more accurately on new information.
Sorry.
No problem. And just for comparison, I asked ChatGPT, come on in, Deborah. There's chairs in the back. Or we can, you know what, we can do this. We're filming, but we can move this out of, this is mine, out of the frame of the, it's okay. All right, just for fun, I put the same question into ChatGPT, just to see the same answer, but like we all had different learning styles. I don't know if this one makes more sense to you, speaks more to your brain. I like that it went right to cat or not cat as an example. All right, there's some vocabulary out there that some of us may know and some of us may not know 100%. When we talk about what is generative AI, we're talking about AI that generates new content and ideas, images, writing, presentations. You may have been hearing the word agentic AI. Has anyone been hearing that lately? It's hot in the business world, right? So we're gonna sell you our agentic AI to solve all of your business problems, right? This is focused on making decisions and acting independently. So think chatbots, customer service chatbots, self-driving cars, and automized workflows. And you're gonna be hearing a lot more of this because the business of selling to other businesses, of how to automate as many processes within their business as possible is booming right now. And again, there's so many companies out there claiming to do this that I think it's a little too early to know what's good. There's also a lot of jobs out there speaking to writers and linguists, which nobody ever wants us. Nobody ever wants to pay us for our work. And suddenly it's like all these companies help train AI, and I did a deep dive into that last week. And so they are real, but they're really for the purposes of consolidating. Company gets a contract from another company. They need some localization with their chatbot, right? Chatbot needs to be able to interact in this language and solve this problem for people. Then they call the linguist or the writer who's in their staff, and they help train the chatbot for that localization or that specialization. On Reddit, some people are picking up extra income this way, but my understanding is it's not great. There's a million companies out there that are doing this. A lot of them are exploitative. They definitely got to me for about 3 days because it was like, linguist, like that never shows up in Indeed. We need a linguist and we're gonna pay you. And then I went on Reddit and they're like you may or may not get work. But for people in other countries who have different native languages, it can be a way to pick up extra income right now and learn more about how agentic AI is trained. So LLM stands for large language model, and this is just massive amounts of text of human language for the goal of understanding and generating human-like language. Again, this is where the bias comes in, right? Because humans produce the language and humans are biased, and so that goes into the training. GPT, you may or may not know, actually stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. That's the GPT and ChatGPT, right? And so those are the largest and most capable LLMs, generative AI. And then hallucination, we became familiar with this use of the term, I think when ChatGPT first came on the scene, and it's a little better now, but this is when the AI just invents stuff that isn't real or is false or inaccurate. I asked it to give me 5 links to podcast or articles from legitimate media sources that talked about companies' concerns for the financial forecast in 2025. This was maybe 4 months ago. And it gave me 5 links with live links, and it was all BS. Like it was like, here's an article from Forbes, here's a podcast from HBR. And I clicked on it and it went nowhere, it wasn't real. But it sounded very convincing. And I had actually sent it to the client because I was in a hurry, cutting corners. And I had to go back to the client and be like, abort. I'm so sorry. I'm just experimenting with AI over here. Sorry. There's also supervised versus unsupervised learning. So in supervised learning, you provide the labeled data. For example, it's spam, it's not spam, right? And then it learns by comparing its guesses to the correct answers and adjusting. So spam detection, predicting housing prices. It's like giving a student the questions and the answers while they study. And then unsupervised learning, you give it the data without labels. So here's a bunch of customer shopping data. You figure it out. So it's like giving the student a pile of puzzle pieces with no picture, right? Imagine doing that in our upstairs space where we do the puzzles, right? So here's grouping customers by behavior, spotting fraud, data compression. So earlier, the reason we call it generative AI is because it's been with us for a long time, but earlier versions relied on predefined rules. So if anybody used Grammarly back in the day, it would just tell you this is wrong. It would flag your errors. It would give you reports about what you're still doing wrong. And now the difference is it can rewrite, it can make suggestions, it can create original language. It can help you describe something in a different way. Of course, we have the bias issue, which we're gonna touch on again, because the output from the AI is only as good as the input. And the input comes from humans, and our vast volumes of text and culture and
You remember the saying, garbage in, garbage out.
exactly, yeah,
It's always gonna be that way.
right. So the big 3, the household names, we talked about this a little bit. ChatGPT, the company behind ChatGPT is OpenAI, and there's Copilot by Microsoft. Just like Microsoft's previous market share, it's embedded now in MS Office Suite. So if you are working for a company or an organization, you may have the paid version because they have sold the paid package to the company. If that is the case, you should be using that one for your work for security reasons. There's a lot of people using personal ChatGPT accounts at work because not all companies and organizations have defined their policies because things are moving very fast. But you should really, if you're doing that, and even for yourself, you should be redacting identifying information. So as companies start to learn the risk, I think there's potential for people to get in trouble for running sensitive company data through a personal ChatGPT account, the free one, where you cannot turn off the learning mode. We're going to talk about that in a bit. So with paid versions of many of these things, you can actually turn off learning mode within your account. So then you're just having it generate things for you, but you're not actually training it. But most of us, the reason we use ChatGPT is because we do train it on what we need, and it gets progressively better and progressively more efficient. That's the advantage. But you don't want to be doing that with your work account. And then DeepSeek. Okay, we've been hearing like, ooh, DeepSeek bad, China. Ooh. The reason the US-based companies are freaking out is because DeepSeek is in many ways a very superior product. And so my attitude is, what is the Chinese government going to do with my data that Facebook isn't already doing in this country, which now endangers any of us who speak up against the administration? So I'm not particularly concerned I don't work in a sensitive field. I'm not giving away secrets to China. One of my Chinese clients was trying to get her son into private schools, and she's a single mother. They don't have a lot of money. So she was asking for financial aid, and she was getting back these half answers. Okay, he's on the waiting list. There might be aid in the future, or if you can pay right now, then we can guarantee his space. It was such a mind melt. She went to DeepSeek and said, here's my situation. My son has been half accepted at these schools. This school is offering no money or telling us that maybe there will be money if we wait 3 months. This school is not really saying anything. She fed in the responses, and it gave her basically a tutorial of the psychology behind private school admissions.
Wow.
She read it to me. It was mind-blowing. And it really informed how we responded in these simple, okay, thank you for the update, but what does this mean? My financial situation still has not changed. And so for a Chinese-built tool to have such deep insight into elite private prep schools on the East Coast of the United States, I thought was really interesting. So I wish I had captured it so I could show it to you.
So let me ask one quick question.
Sure.
Copilot's always coming up on my work.
It's embedded in your MS Office suite now.
Yeah, I think that's better than ChatGPT or.
It is we're going to get into that.
Oh, okay.
Because it's what do you mean by better? Is it more efficient for your purposes and what you want to do, or are you approaching it from a privacy and security perspective? It's all a little bit.
Both.
Yeah.
Tackle that at the end when the whole room can get
Yeah.
an answer too.
Yeah.
So we talked about the bias issue. I don't really see that changing, right? It's a reflection of who we are as humans in society. And these original models were mostly trained on English. And so that's culturally biased too. And it's expanding into other languages, but it's not as caught up as English versions. When they say that this is a global technology that's changing everything, myself as a linguist and multiculturalist, I'm like, wait a minute. You developed this technology mostly in English, and then you're telling the entire world that this applies to them? That's still evolving, but that's a cultural consideration as well. With actual accuracies getting better, I'm sure we've all, if you played with it a year ago or 2 years ago, ChatGPT in particular, you're probably finding it to be more efficient. I still would hesitate to use it as a fact checker though. We're going to talk about Perplexity, which is trying to position itself as the reliable AI for learning stuff and finding stuff and knowing stuff, but don't have ChatGPT or even Copilot check facts. Don't do that. Be old-fashioned about that. It uses a ton of energy. I didn't bring any statistics about the water or this or that. We're going to have to build more data centers. All of these events that I went to this past spring, no one likes to talk about this. It's like the inconvenient truth. I watched presenters respond to it. When audience members brought it up, nobody led with it. So for me personally, I'm a child of the 70s. I turn off the light when I leave the room. I just try to be very intentional. I'm not gonna mess around with it for my own amusement. Send me a picture of this, create a picture of this, put the head of a dog on the body of a fish on a skateboard. You're burning energy. And so it's not gonna go anywhere. We're gonna have to figure out how to deal with this. But already at the talk at the Weinberg last month, the New York Times reporter had written an article that went viral about how a lot of younger people are using ChatGPT as a dating companion. And they say they're actually dating ChatGPT. And psychologists are of two minds. They're like, hey, in a society where it's a real thing, but that means they're on it all the time, talking to it all the time. And this guy stood up and said, it just feels like we're throwing our climate goals under the bus in favor of having a ChatGPT boyfriend. And people in the audience like stood up and started hollering and clapping because we're already having this data center controversy in Frederick County, and we're just going to need more land and more data centers, and the grids aren't ready. I had clients last summer who worked for Rocky Mountain Institute, which is an energy think tank, and one of their jobs was to go around the country and talk to smaller municipalities and say, what are you doing? How are you preparing for the increased strain on the energy grid? Because what you cannot do is pass this cost onto consumer households. And 90% of the time, the response was, it's going to be a problem. And the one that I went to, the French American Chamber of Commerce a few weeks ago, there was a guy from Capgemini, and somebody brought this up, and his answer was basically like, you can help me if you remember, but I understood his answer to be like, the AI will figure out the solution to that problem. Like, you still need land.
For the data centers and powering them, are they able to use solar panels on top of the data centers? That just came to my mind. I thought, hey, would that be a solution?
It's a potential solution, but I feel like this is all coming in at the time when we're pumping the brakes on government support of the green energy switch too. So nobody knows where this is going.
You would need absolutely hectares of land to put enough solar power in one data center per week. There's no way that solar is going to be the solution.
Wow.
So that brings us to the debate in Frederick County. What do we want to be? We want to be both an agricultural community and a tech hub. Remains to be seen how communities reconcile that. I'm not here to shame anybody, but I wouldn't give a tablet to a child and be like, knock yourself out with creating images all afternoon for your own amusement. I just try to be very intentional. It's just like recycling, right? Is my one little effort gonna make a difference? I don't know, but for me, it's important to be intentional about it. And then of course, privacy and the copyrighted material. So OpenAI is a little murky they haven't been clear about how much copyrighted material they use to train their models, but it is inevitably in there. Meta doesn't care, right? They just went straight to the pirated source and just trained on tons and tons of other people's copyrighted materials. As a writer, I personally have a real problem with output of writers and artists being stolen and not compensated for these companies that are valued in the billions with people throwing money at them. So I wanted to do a deeper dive into who trained in what way, but I just didn't have time. But it's something to research if you feel the same way. Because it's also changing our ideas about intellectual property and who gets compensated for content and output.
I just wanted to say, so I wrote an article and I did a little bit of research about AI and copyright. As far as I know, this is recently, anything that is solely generated by any one of these AI companies, ChatGPT or whatever, is not copyrightable by you or your company unless a human manipulates and changes that material, edits it, changes it in some way. So that's something to always keep in mind when you're like.
A whole slide on that.
You have
Not to cut you off, but yeah, I'm just trying to make sure we have enough time for discussion.
Sorry, I'm talking over you. I didn't know if you were gonna have time to go into the copyright, but here we go. Copyright.
But yeah, just as Stephanie said, and again, this is US, different countries have different, and the argument has been like, why should we care? China doesn't care about that. They're just gonna take everything and train models and make it faster. But I feel like for normal people as consumers, that's not really, these are the tech bro billionaires who are like, my product needs to be at the top, making these arguments, in my opinion, right? For me as a consumer user, just using it to make my workflow more efficient or make my life easier, it matters to me. what was, but that's always been the case, right? US copyright law not applying to the rest of the world, that hasn't changed. And different cultures having different ideas of plagiarism and what they can use and not use, that's nothing of that has changed. So there's always been that tension. My understanding from, I don't know if you went to the one where the lawyer was there talking about this at the event we were at, but he was saying, I'm going to show you a graph in a moment for how to ensure that AI assisted content is still within this gray area of your content. If the original comes from AI, intellectual property laws do not apply. If you redline it, use it as a co-writer to go back and forth on drafts, but your original draft was the one that you put in there to start the process of it helping you, that falls into the AI assisted content area, human modification. But again, just like I had a friend who worked at the Copyright Office, hope she's still there, she hasn't lost her job, but this sufficiently creative clause here is interesting and still open. Her job was to look at original artwork and decide if it's unique enough to earn the copyright. And you wouldn't believe how many people send in their children's artwork and pay the $300 to try to get it copyrighted as a gift, like an 8-year-old's gonna care. And so I know from my friend Becca that sufficiently creative clause has always been murky area too. It depends on what you're doing, whether or not this is important to you. If you have a brand or a business or the content you produce, it is very important to own it. I think it's worth going deeper into this. So AI generated text or curating AI produced images into a larger human authored work could meet the threshold. Again, that's pretty vague. So pieces of it coming into the thing that you conceptualized. But it's not all bad, right? Really, when you're using the right tool for the right purpose, you can learn, you can brainstorm, you can get out of writer's block, you can improve your language. I am working on an ebook of analyzing tools specifically for language development. So hit me up later in the summer if you are studying other languages and you want to know what are the best free and cheap tools for practicing conversation and enhancing vocabulary. It's great for organizing. It's fantastic for all of us who have trouble getting our initial ideas down on the screen or the page, right, in a way that's going to resonate with the audience. And of course, proofreading and reviewing content. But we don't ask it to write for us. I just feel like we're slipping. In the beginning, there was this notion of people have a right to know when they're interacting with a bot. And I still believe that, but we're quickly moving away from it. And nobody knows where this is going. What's the point of social media if bots are just generating content in order to generate, in order to hack the algorithm? I foresee a future in which the evolution of people just getting off social media continues, right? Because at the end of the day, we're still humans trying to connect with humans. These are tools to help us do that better. All right. So I've done this with a couple of organizations, mostly with people working in English as their target language, who our clients were early adopters because ChatGPT was a game changer, right? They never again have to spend 3 hours on a sensitive email trying to deliver a difficult message in the right tone. So I learned a lot in the early days from our clients. It just solved a lifelong pain point. So if you are working in English, but it's not your first language and you're having to do very high level sophisticated writing, woo-wee, they were on this, right? But then pretty soon there became a divide between how people sound when they speak and how they write. But you know what? As a practical matter, for external communication, for dealing with clients, for sending the right message, who cares? It was all a win-win for the organizations and the companies. That was also where I learned that a lot of people were using it in secret because companies had not yet caught up and told people, here's our policy. Some client supervisors were just like, oh my gosh, what happened to you? And they wouldn't tell them that they were actually using AI to assist with their communication. But when we teach this for analysts, I actually did a version of this at NATO last fall, a virtual workshop, and not everybody was a non-native English writer. It's just that these analysts have so much complex information in their head And when they're writing for a general audience who doesn't necessarily know the 200-year history of a region that's been experiencing conflict, they get so in the weeds that this is where AI can really help them out, writing white papers, writing for a general audience. But again, it always starts with you creating the ideas, right? At least for image output, writing output content. All right. ChatGPT, if you have worked with it, has a little bit of a learning curve, right? ChatGPT is your generalist, and the success lies in the art of prompting. So this is some things that my clients were using in the beginning. It's a starting place, right? And you can have that refining conversation with the tool, but you can get so much better output the first time if you know how to prompt it correctly. So these are just very general basics. They're not great. It's logical, right? Check my paper, check my grammar. Is this clear? But you have to get as specific as possible, and that goes for all the big three. Has anybody used the act like a prompt or a you are now? That's a super easy, so that's the best practice at the moment. That's a super easy way. You're giving it context up front because remember, you're training it. So act like a consultant or you are now. Those are basically interchangeable. And you're working on the structure of a presentation. Present this in the form of PowerPoint that lasts about 15 minutes for this type of audience with these goals. And we're gonna show you some examples, but yeah, feel free to take pictures of that. For presentations in particular, it can be very helpful. You tell it who you are, who you're presenting to, and the goal, what do you want the audience to take away from it? So that's a thing that as humans, we're a little limited, right? I know what I want you to take away from it, but I don't have access to all this data for how the best way to impart that to you, right? To a general audience of all kinds of different people and different learning styles. So that's where it can be really helpful. Create something about this that contains this, right? So for example, this is what we did at NATO. Act like an analyst drafting a white paper. Organize these main points and details into an outline. Here's the do and don't is another best practice to get better output the first time. Do identify any redundancies. Don't change or eliminate any content. I would definitely use that one. AI is still not great at discerning which details are important for your audience and which ones are not. And it will sometimes when it's summarizing, it goes too far and it eliminates some critical details. So you have to tell it, don't change the content, do not delete details. Create an order that is easy for a non-specialist to follow. And then if you have an example of what it is you're going for, give it that with redacted identifying information. And then if you have notes, you've been doing brainstorming notes, you can dump those in there too. Of course, you're going to get a big old prompt, and not all of the tools allow you that much space in the free versions, but ChatGPT does. Copilot has a word limit for the free version. So you can't dump a whole paper into it and say, make my paper structured similar to this paper. Here's a 3-page example. But when you get into these longer prompts, you do need to help it parse, because we've all seen that where the text is all just like on Slack, it's all just jammed up against other text. And so you need to have some system for showing it where to parse the breaks. And those are called delimiters. I did this 4 months ago. This may have changed. For a simple one, you want to set off the text. For example, here's an example. It's a 3-page paper, right? You could do the triple quotation marks at the beginning of that block of text and then the triple quotation marks at the end to signal to it, here's the example, right? Colon is fine for shorter prompts. But if you want to get really nerdy, these XML tags work. This is the best practice right now. All right. First one's an easy one, right? Simple, just use a colon. But here I want to dump some text into it. I want to dump my draft into it, right? So I would do a line with the triple quotations, my text, and then an end line, the triple quotations. This is a good thing to memorize and start practicing with. So if you want to use the XML tags, you just label each part of the prompt. So review this presentation, make suggestions for better clarity. This is what I want you to do, AI. I want you to shorten the text, but I don't want you to eliminate content. And then I'm going to give it some context. Here's my background. You're an analyst presenting to a general audience of non-specialists. What does the audience need to take away from it? It could be your audience of readers as well. Here's an example if you do have one. And then the only little trick here to learn is that, you're going to use this to set off, here's my example text, and then you do when you're at the very end of that text, you do the backslash here. And I can get this to people if you email me later. This is a real one I used with a client a couple weeks ago. Act like an SEO strategist who needs to structure an audit report for a presentation to a client who has intermediate technical SEO knowledge. This client has a company that sells luxury bed linens and uses Shopify. Please suggest a framework for how to present the audit report to the client. So what does that mean? That means that they had run an audit on this client's website to find out the problems with search engine optimization and what they were proposing to start with for elevating how findable the website is. And his clients have different levels. Some of them are like, that's why I'm paying you. I don't know anything about SEO. Some of them actually have quite a deal of so in these 20-minute calls with these clients, they don't want to go on and on teaching the client about SEO if they already have some background knowledge. But he's also a non-native English speaker dealing with American clients, and so he has trouble being clear and concise. And he'll often go off the rails because, again, he's a specialist with all these super fine details in his head. And I want to tell you all the things, and anybody who's doing client-facing work, that they don't want all the things. You got to break it down for them. So the output that came out was good. He used it to prepare for that meeting. This is one I did preparing for this presentation. Act like a researcher working for an intellectual property law firm. Please provide 3 to 5 resources that explain how intellectual property law, copyright, and trademark applies to. So we're just going to go through a handful of tools. I approach this from the perspective of communication, and I work with a lot of writers. Pro Writing Aid is an alternative to Grammarly. I feel a little bad for Grammarly because they were the leaders in AI-assisted writing. All right, I'm not going to log in. But there are a few other alternatives that are arguably better now. And so with many of these, if you go to features, you don't even have to log in. You can just dump your text in here. If you just need proofreading, if you just need a grammar check, if you need to paraphrase, if you need some rephrasing. So that's been the main difference with Grammarly and its competitors in the past 2 years. You don't have to buy it and download the app anymore. You just go right to the website and do one little specific thing for one paragraph. I like that. It eliminates a step. All right. Oh, one of my favorites, and nobody knows what it is. Goblin Tools. Has anyone heard of this? Nope. Some of the best tools out there, and this goes for everything online, it's not even in the AI race war. I don't think Goblin Tools is out there asking for VC funding. It's just somebody has capability to build something that they feel like people need, and then they build it as an open source tool. This requires no account. Here's what I love about it. This is what we do with our learners. The formalizer is you don't have to prompt. You've got all of these options for, I need to make this text more formal and clear. Yeah, and I said I don't play just to play, but I do play with the sarcasm. So somebody give me a simple line. I'm gonna show you to make it more sarcastic.
You need to pay by the 15th.
Okay. Please pay
Or
your
else.
balance by the 15th of this month.
Or we'll stop supporting you.
Yeah.
It has to be snarky, right?
We can make it more snarky, right? That's the thing. You don't even have to do the work anymore. I want to be more sarcastic.
What's the 3, Joey?
They call it spiciness levels.
Nice. Can you select it?
Yeah. No, take your sweet time. No rush at all. Just ignore that tiny little deadline to pay your balance by the 15th of this month. So,
Can you do snarky to see what they, you know, the difference between sarcastic and snarky is? Oh, less snarky.
yeah, but we can make it angrier. Yeah. I think this is this is how we make it more angry. Yeah, angry. You must pay your balance. Says unacceptable and is causing unnecessary headaches. Yeah. Don't test my patience. I'm gonna make it even spicier. So it's not even, yeah, you've got five peppers, right? I want to get angrier than this.
Oh, I like that. No excuses, no delays.
Yeah.
Sounds like the mock.
Yeah. Get it done. But the other thing about Goblin Tools that our clients in particular have really found helpful, the formula, because tone in your target language is the final frontier. It's very difficult to master, even for very advanced learners. But I love this. I want to send somebody an email, and I'm one of those people who just always, I don't know if I am, I hope not, just accidentally pisses people off on email. You know those people, right? I want to be a little bit more conscious of this. Or I'm just in get it done mode, right? And I sent something off to somebody and I didn't think about what that sounds like on their end. If it's a sensitive situation, you can dump your text in here and it will tell you how this is going to likely come across to your reader. And so I have a colleague in Hungary who is the most loving person you will ever meet. And she drives me crazy on email because I wake up in the morning and with the time difference, it's like my inbox is already, I need this yesterday. It's like you just woke up and I need you to drop everything that you had on your agenda for today and do my thing that I need for you right now. And I don't think she's aware of how often she comes across that way. So I have dumped some of her emails in here at times to see, is it just me? And Goblin Tools, no, this person applies a lot of pressure.
Julie, if you tie up this thought and then we'll move to questions.
Okay, so professor is I need to explain something complex to a lay audience. You can dump it in here and it will give you an explanation or an analogy that you may or may not want to use. Also very helpful. The others that we didn't get to, I just want to show you very quickly. Claude, writers are using this a lot. Here, it's already, the thing you want it to do is already programmed in. That's the main difference between the big three. And so a lot of professional writers have been gravitating to Claude and recommending it as a writing partner. And then Perplexity is going after, where did it go? Okay. Perplexity is going after Google and wants to position itself as the replacement search engine. Perplexity gives you the resources where it pulled the information from.
Oh.
It actually has a really funny commercial they just came out with the actor from Squid Game. So just look up Perplexity AI Squid Game and you'll see, I mean, they're really going after Google, which I think is great because Google pretty much just takes you to Gemini and then Reddit these days.